Benchmarks are crucial to your LinkedIn advertising. But you know what's even more crucial? Benchmarks that measure both the marketing and the sales. That's what we're talking on this week's episode of LinkedIn Ads Show.
Welcome to the LinkedIn Ads Show. Here's your host, AJ Wilcox.
Hey there, LinkedIn Ads fanatics. As he said, I'm AJ Wilcox. I'm the host of the weekly podcast, the LinkedIn Ads Show. I'm thrilled to welcome you to the show for advanced B2B marketers in their evolution of mastering LinkedIn ads and achieving true pro status. Today, we're reviewing one of the most useful benchmark reports I've ever come across. I know you're going to love it. It not only takes into account the LinkedIn ads performance, but also the arguably more important and more valuable sales performance. I haven't seen anything like it before. I'm excited to introduce you to a guest, a friend of mine now, Ruby James from LinkedIn. She and her team assembled this report. She'll be sharing some of her top takeaways from it. And of course, I want you to scroll to the bottom right now of the show notes, go and get access to the report so you can check it out and follow along.
The LinkedIn Ads Show is proudly brought to you by b2link.com, the LinkedIn ads experts.
That's right. B2Linked is the ad agency 100% dedicated to LinkedIn ads, and we have been since 2014. You know, back before it was cool. We build a custom strategy for every account we work with. You get to work directly with me and my local team. You won't get any sort of cookie cutter approach or standard account templates from us. No siree. Plus, with the strategies that we've developed and our mastery of the LinkedIn ads platform, we always save our clients more than we charge. So it's kind of like getting the best in the biz for free. If you'd like to explore partnering with us for your LinkedIn ads management, schedule your free discovery call with me today at b2linked.com/discovery. All right, do you have a question, a review, or feedback for the show? You can message me privately on LinkedIn. My DMs are free and they're open. Or you can also email us at podcast@b2linked.com. If you want to attach a link to a voice recording of you, I'd love to play you right here on the show. And of course, I'm happy to keep you anonymous or shout you out. All right, without further ado, let's hop right into the interview with Ruby. Let's hit it. Ruby, so excited to have you here on the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, AJ. I'm thrilled to be here.
For those of you who have not heard of Ruby James, she leads the LinkedIn Marketing for Startups organization there within LinkedIn. Welcome. We're so excited to have you here. Tell us a little bit more about your background.
Yeah. So you already shared this, but I most recently lead our LinkedIn Marketing for Startups org. I've been part of our startups org since its inception 4 years ago. I've actually been at LinkedIn almost for 9.5 years now, which is so wild to think about. But a little bit about the LinkedIn Marketing for Startups team, which has been the largest portion of my LinkedIn journey. This team was created really with the goal of helping startups speed time to ROI on LinkedIn. And that was really done through our team's specialized startup-specific support. And what that includes is LinkedIn marketing strategy and advisory on other important levers that we found drive strong results on LinkedIn, including advisory on sales and marketing alignment, measurement, the latest go-to-market insights, board-ready reporting, all the things that ensure that your paid marketing strategy is as optimized and efficient and really yields the highest ROI possible. We also focus on partnering with VCs to ensure they're aware of all of the best practices that enable startups in their portfolio to maximize the value they see on LinkedIn. And so that's really a little bit about our team, where I spend the majority of my time, and I should say all of my time in, the work side of me. A little bit about me personally. So outside of work, I'm based in San Francisco. I always joke I'm a third generation San Franciscan, so a unicorn in my own right. And I love hiking. I also like to surf. I'm an avid yogi and actually teach yoga on the side at my local studio, as well as volunteering at a few organizations that bring yoga to underserved communities. So spending a lot of time both inside and outside of work on things I'm very passionate about, including startups and yoga, movement, nature, being outside as much as I can.
That is so cool. It's great to get to know you better. I love so much that you have an entire organization within LinkedIn dedicated just to startups because yes, startups, they require different attention. They need more help and they need different help for LinkedIn ads. So I'm so glad. It seems like a big hug from LinkedIn to startups that, they gave you this team.
I love the description you use, big hug. There's definitely other verticals throughout LinkedIn marketing, but we're actually the only verticalized team within our larger, where we sit, new business org. So essentially, we've verticalized to support startups in their first typically 1 to 2+ years when they're first building their foundations on LinkedIn, because we know that startups have such unique needs. They have aggressive growth goals. They need to see ROI fast and accelerate the testing phase, especially when trying a new channel. And so we were able to really make the case to give specifically startups, again, in this stage that they're in when they're first trying and sampling LinkedIn, this big hug. So it's great.
Oh, totally. All right. So the reason why we brought you here on the show is because you and your team authored a new report that I think is incredible. It's called Growth Benchmarks for Scaling B2B Startups. Can you tell us about the inception of this report?
Yes. So I'd love to share a little bit more about kind of the impetus of the report and how we got here. So yes, as you said, introducing the Growth Benchmarks for Scaling B2B Startups report. As I mentioned, my team supports thousands of startups. And over the course of the last couple years, both, gathering from direct conversations with marketing leaders and also just aggregating surging topics and trends that we were hearing across our customer calls, what we found was really the biggest ask from our customers was to understand what good looks like in this new era of B2B. So we all know the B2B landscape has fundamentally changed over the last few years due to macro challenges. Everyone's talking about larger B2B buying committees, shifting B2B buyer priorities, increased competition. And really what we've heard, like the biggest ask was our startups wanting to know what to do or how to succeed in this new environment. And so I first started to look at what already existed in the market today to solve this. And I observed that although there were a good amount of B2B benchmark reports that already exist, whether it's from partners like Gartner or VC firms, what I was finding was that all of the pre-existing B2B benchmark reports really only featured the medium and top quartile of growth benchmarks and nothing else. And I found that it was super important to democratize these insights, but really go beyond just that and democratize the how. Okay, great. We now know what the top quartile is seeing from a growth rate perspective or funnel conversion rate perspective, but how did they get there? And so understanding that there was a gap in being able to really share and highlight and democratize the how and the tactics. Obviously, on the LinkedIn side, we're sitting on some really rich B2B insights. We decided to pull in HubSpot for startups, given their strong reach in the startup community and their role as a CRM and being able to touch what happens beyond the lead through to closed won. So we brought HubSpot for startups in to really partner together and solve the question or answer the question, what are the top performing startups doing? The ones with the highest year-over-year growth, the strongest funnel conversion rates, what are they doing strategy and tactic wise? And so together with HubSpot for startups, we surveyed 250 B2B startups and then also analyzed top performing startups on LinkedIn with the strongest results and pulled through these insights to really bring together and bring to life this report that highlights the median to top quartile metrics like other reports you'll see in the market, but also the how, what startups are doing to actually get their strategy and tactic wise.
Oh, perfect. And first of all, everyone I talk to loves benchmark reports. It's super important that when we are doing something that we can tell, yes, are we going way off into left field, or are we doing a good job, or are we even killing it, slaying it, which you can find out, especially because your report has, both the median, which you can be okay, are we totally off base here? And you have the top quartile to be are we destroying? This is great.
Totally. And yeah, the top quartile and median benchmarks, both business metrics and sales and marketing metrics, serve as a really nice gauge and pulse point to understand, like, how am I stacking up against my, peers that share the same perhaps ARR bucket as me if we're looking at business metrics, or like ASP if we're looking at sales and marketing metrics. And then, yeah, taking it a step further, really what I get most excited about with this report and some of the key takeaways we'll talk about today are what came out of us being able to cut the data and actually see what are the startups that have the highest year-over-year growth across all the ARR buckets, the strongest conversion rates through the funnel and cost pers through the funnel across all the ASP buckets. What specifically is that cohort of top performing startups doing strategy-wise? And, even if you're exceeding the metrics that you're seeing from a benchmark standpoint, you can still then pull through these strategy insights to perhaps go far and beyond, the benchmarks that you're seeing in the report as well. Or again, if you're not where you want to be, these tactics are going to help you get there because this is what the top performing startups are seeing work for them. So 3 kind of key takeaways that I'm excited to dig in more with you that came through our research. First is this fundamental shift in measurement that we're seeing. As I mentioned, everyone's talking about longer sales cycles, bigger buying committees. It takes more time and effort to win a deal. And really what came through in our research is that the top performing startups are measuring the impact of their marketing programs over a longer time horizon. And they know in order to understand the value of their efforts and really what's working best and driving the strongest ROI, they really need to extend the horizon in which they measure. That was one key insight that I'm really excited to dig more in with you on. And then the 2 others, number 2, so what we'll see in the data, and I'm excited about all the insights as you can hear, but for number 2, we can now finally point to the ROI of a strong executive engagement strategy. And I think historically, what I've seen across our customers is that executive thought leadership has kind of been seen as this like vanity portion of their strategy. And we now actually have data to show that it's driving the strongest results through the lens of direct marketing source pipeline. And with that, we now have these ROI insights that reinforce it should be a core part of your marketing strategy. And there's now an opportunity cost to not incorporating your execs into your marketing strategy. And as a startup, you'll be doing yourself a disservice if you don't. So that's one big one I'm really excited to dig more in with you on. I know, having followed you for a while, you have a perspective on that too.
Totally.
And then the third insight or takeaway that I'm excited to dive a little bit more into today as well is how we're seeing these top performing startups reimagine their funnel. So what really came out of the research and further conversation with a lot of the thought leaders that we interviewed for this report is how we need to reimagine our funnel. I feel like we talk a lot about the funnel. The word funnel shows up all throughout this report. It's a really helpful mental model for marketers and leaders to think about, but we're all well aware that it doesn't actually work like that. And this report really started to make it clear that we need to reimagine how we talk about marketing through the stages of the B2B buyer's journey. And then, beyond those 3 takeaways, I think this underlying buzz and theme is around tightening sales and marketing alignment, something we've been talking about for 5+, 7+ years. But we'll talk more about kind of how that pulls through and how that's an important piece to always be evaluating. But those were really the core takeaways that came out beyond, why we did this. It became very clear that, again, beyond the actual metrics and benchmarks, there were some key insights that we know are going to help startups be more successful as they go to market in this new B2B era.
Amazing. And just for all of you fanatics who are listening, I'm sure you want to check out the report. We put the link right down there in the show notes. So go open it up and read right alongside of us as we're talking about it. All right. So Ruby, obviously going through a report like this, there's going to be lots of information and maybe some outcomes where you go, yeah, duh. Like that it told us exactly what we already knew. Were there any of those kind of reaffirming beliefs or things that the data told you like, yep, I already knew that, and now I just know it a little bit stronger?
Yeah, it's a great question. And for those of you that have opened up the report and are following along, in the very beginning of the report, you'll see some cuts of benchmark data. So both business metrics cut by ARR bucket and then conversion rates through the funnel and lead volume and cost pers through the funnel by ASP or average sales price. Again, when we pulled through this cohort of startups that had the strongest metrics, so we consider them like these top performers, we kind of found something that we kind of were like, duh, like this is what we're hearing on calls. This is what we're seeing across the thousands of startups in general, but it was even more concentrated within this cohort of top performing startups, was really this shift in measuring success beyond the lead. So now about 75% or 3/4 of the top performing startups that we surveyed shared that their North Star metric was now downstream KPIs like sales meeting volume, opportunities, total pipeline, closed won revenue. I could even say 3 years ago, there were much more startups that were measuring success on lead volume and demo volume. Like, hey, we just need to bring as many demos as possible. And I think it's great that we're seeing this shift to measuring metrics that actually, matter down to the bottom line and holding, both marketing and sales accountable together to those higher ROI focused metrics and really taking ownership over the entire journey through to closed won. We interviewed Kaciejenkins, who's the SVP of Sendoso, and she really validated how great this is and how, she is, bringing this shift within her startup Sendoso as well. And she actually even referenced the CMO panel at SaaStr that recently happened a few months ago, where it was a core topic where more and more marketing teams are taking ownership over the full pipeline number. And they're taking it a step further by doing away with those sales versus marketing attribution battles. And I really loved how her and I chatted after this report to, again, get her perspective and any other insights we can glean. And she made the call out that she now refers to her sales team and marketing team at Sendoso as one team called the revenue team.
Cool.
She's completely shifted where it's less about who gets credit for what. And instead, these teams are really up-leveling their measurement sophistication and up-leveling or adjusting and enhancing the timeline and time horizons to measure what shared motions or tactics both teams are seeing the most success with, what's moving the needle, what's driving the strongest pipeline, conversions through the funnel and ROI. And so that's been like a key shift that we're seeing. And although it's like, duh, if startups are now going to be very ROI focused, like marketers should be measuring success beyond the lead, it was really helpful to see the data and seeing how it's now very much table stakes. Majority of startups are reporting on this change within that top performing cohort. But I'm curious your perspective on this, AJ. Like, I'm curious if you're seeing more marketing and sales sharing same numbers, if there's any challenges that are coming up as a result of that. I was very excited to see this validated.
Yeah, totally. We've seen the same thing over the last 10 years of us being an agency in business, dealing almost exclusively with B2B. We definitely have seen, like, probably the first 7 years of our inception, the majority of clients were very much lead focused. Like, get us conversions, get us leads. We're going to throw them over the wall to sales and then get mad at them when they're not working the deals hard enough. Over the last 3 years, I've definitely seen a movement. And if I had to guess why, I think there's probably 2 factors. The first is that we have better technologies at our fingertips to allow us this kind of tracking. If you didn't have even your CRM tracking what your LinkedIn ads performance or any ads performance was doing, you're really stuck. Like, yeah, you could go and marry those things up manually, but that takes a lot of time and effort, and you may not be able to do it super often. Whereas now all of these tools, I mean, we've got Factors, Dream Data, I can go on and on. So many of these attribution platforms that do have direct integrations right into LinkedIn's ecosystem, and they also plug into other ecosystems, allowing us to kind of see everything in one picture. So that's kind of like number one, we have tools. And then second of all, I think marketers, we're getting better. We're getting better at using those tools and understanding. And I think B2B marketers, like, we're finally stepping into this role of, like, we have to be smarter and we have to be more capable and better with data than B2C marketers are in a lot of cases, because we're dealing with longer sales cycles, more of an incomplete picture, larger deals. All of these things just scream to me like you need to get better at data.
Totally. This wasn't included in depth in the report, but coming, again, as I've had more conversations about the data, about these insights and what we're learning from the research we did, I did a quick look. We use Gong, and I was able to see the increase in mentions of these third-party sophisticated measurement solutions, as you mentioned, Factors, AI, Hockey Stack, RevSure, Dream Data. And we've seen about 300% increase in mentions, just showing exactly what you said, where we're just seeing this shift towards bringing on these more sophisticated measurement solutions to be able to really track and understand what's moving the needle as you work more closely with sales or align, the same goals as sales. And then the other piece that just more anecdotally that I've been seeing sitting on all the data that we have on the B2B side at LinkedIn is we are noticing more and more startups recently hiring for like a head of measurement or head of analytics. Oftentimes that role might sit with someone that also just owns demand gen, or again, it's not bucketed as its own specific scope, but I'm seeing that it is now becoming more and more common to prioritize bringing that on sooner.
Oh, I totally believe that. Yeah, the sooner we can get those insights. And anyone out there, if you're considering a job or a role switch, look into data science, and your brain being plugged into marketing's data and sales data could do some incredible things. I think there's going to be a role open, at least one in every large company.
The other really interesting reaffirming insight we saw, and this is kind of a nice segue into the first part around just sales and marketing sharing, more of those downstream metrics and marketing taking more ownership over the full pipeline number versus just looking at lead volume, is what we're seeing startups do with ABM. And what we found that's super interesting is the top performing startups have really doubled down on aligning their targeting with sales, which again, if we're going to share a total pipeline number, like it makes sense that we'll then optimize or think about our targeting more strategically with them as well. We all know ABM is table stakes. So like this again was another okay, this is what we're seeing. This just validates what we all already know. But what I thought was more interesting or a step further in what we already know was that we actually looked at on the LinkedIn platform percentage of startups by stage that are leveraging an ABM list. And the most interesting data point that we saw was we looked at this in 2022, and then we looked at it again this year in 2024. And we saw that early stage startups' use of ABM actually grew by 30%. So even though we all know ABM is, what you should have this as a portion of your strategy, we all know, it's super important to align with sales and target the accounts that they're prioritizing. We saw that actual shift in behavior where more and more startups earlier on are actually bringing it into their strategy. And there's a few different ways that we kind of saw that come to life. I want to quote, there's this amazing marketing leader. Her name's bettymok. She used to lead marketing at LinkedIn, and then she moved on to Pendo.io and now is at Consensus. And when her and I were chatting through this report, she talked about this trend of marketing deepening their focus on what she calls riding shotgun with sales. And so, she described that as more and more, again, of these top performing startups are targeting all of their decision makers. They're not just targeting the, job titles that might be requesting the demo or just the C-suite, if they think that that's going to be their needle mover or influencer. They're targeting decision makers, influencers, even hidden buyers across their target accounts. And they're doing one-to-many, one-to-few, one-to-one ABM tactics. And then one of the newer things we're seeing is the addition of pipeline acceleration campaigns. So more and more marketing teams are targeting open pipelines to nurture these buying committees from initial conversion all the way to closed won. And we're seeing different tactics to do so, whether that's, highly targeted nurture streams, addressing persona specific challenges, or addressing, an industry or segment challenge. We really now have the data from this report and from a lot of the conversations that we had with these thought leaders that by, as Betty says, riding shotgun with sales from, initial engagement with your brand all the way to close one, those startups are seeing shorter sales cycles and higher win rates. There's this opportunity cost in this new era of B2B go-to-market. If we're not staying present throughout the entire journey and marketing kind of helping sales do so and creating that halo effect, you're not going to see as strong of funnel conversion rates and closed won conversion rates. And your deals aren't going to close as quickly. But you've been doing this for forever. I think you can agree that ABM's been a conversation for, I want to say hundreds of years.
Yeah.
But would love to hear your take on this and how you've seen ABM evolve most recently.
Well, it's so interesting because with LinkedIn ads, we've been able to do all of these things. I think it was like 2017.
Yeah.
When we got the ability to upload lists. Like, we've been able to do all of this stuff. But if you had to think about every time you have access to a new audience, let me download it to a CSV, let me go upload it to LinkedIn, let me go create a campaign targeting this list. Like, let's be honest, we as marketers, we're busy and we're not always thinking about doing that. But this is a technology nod, I think. Like, now, because we have CRMs that are directly integrated into LinkedIn, we have products like Zapier who can create a dynamic list and keep it updated for us, push it right into LinkedIn. It takes out all of those middle steps. And now marketers are actually using it because, surprise, surprise, if we have to do it manually, it's probably going to drop.
You're totally right. It's, through the test of time, we've been able to upload accounts within LinkedIn. And that's really what differentiates us as our first party data and our ability to really accurately target, obviously, the right professionals at the right specific companies that you want to engage and get in front of. I think, to your point, what's been so great over the last couple of years is how we've evolved in our ability to leverage, obviously, like a Zapier or even like our intent partners like G2 to kind of combine your data with intent data to get even more specific around, okay, like if I have X amount of dollars, I should be allocating that to the portion of my target account list. If I can't reach 100% of it, who's most likely to convert or most likely to talk to sales or ready to talk to sales. LinkedIn on our side, we've also developed a new tab where you can actually see it's, referred to as like the company's engagement report, the new ABM companies hub, where you can actually see companies with the strongest engagement with your brand to help you think about slicing and dicing your list in different ways. Maybe you want to create a target account list with the sales as target accounts that have shown low engagement with your brand, and you want to serve them a different message than the accounts that have already gone to your website or have engaged with you organically. So what's cool is that, to your point, AJ, we're evolving more and more how we can get even smarter with ABM, both with LinkedIn's data and then the data of our partners, which is pretty awesome.
Oh, I'm a huge fan. Thank you.
Well, collective thank you to LinkedIn product if they're listening. They've been very avid too, and like listening to gong calls and understanding, what more we can be doing to up level what it is we bring to our startups and the broader market, which is awesome.
Oh yeah.
There's one other piece I think of this that might be worth sharing in like what was reaffirming to you. And I know I mentioned it as a takeaway, like kind of like a always on hum in the beginning, but I think something else that needs to be mentioned is just what sales and marketing alignment means today. I think what's interesting is, since the inception of our startups team, 4 to 5 years ago, we've been talking about sales and marketing alignment. And what we found in our research that, again, just validated what we already knew, but is still important to say because it's so important, is the startups with the highest year-over-year growth, the strongest funnel conversion rates, and strongest efficiencies, like cost per through the funnel, they actually cited not just strong sales and marketing alignment, but actually the behavior of continuing to find new ways to improve sales and marketing alignment as one of their most effective go-to-market strategy enhancements that helped improve their funnel conversion rates. So I bring that up because obviously aligning your targeting with sales, thinking about sharing, how you're going to reassess your North Star metrics with sales and measure that, but also more generally, like how can you as a startup keep up leveling your sales and marketing alignment is just so important. And I think that kind of relates to everything we just talked about and kind of where, what else we'll probably talk about. But I guess the reason I bring it up is because even if you think you have amazing sales and marketing alignment, there is still always something more you can be doing. And as you learn more about, what's happening with the deals in your pipeline, what you're seeing work, what you're seeing, you need to optimize or maybe learnings, those are kind of the data points that you can use to improve how you align with your sales team and consistently look into that on whether it's a monthly or quarterly basis, reassessing how you can be more effective with sales.
Yeah. I've always said no amount of speaking with, developing a relationship with your sales counterparts is wasted. It's kind of this analogy of sharpening the saw. So if you're trying to cut down a tree, you could take your saw out there and, have hard labor, crank on that tree for 2 hours, or you could spend 10 minutes at the beginning to sharpen your saw and then only spend 20 minutes. You've taken time away from doing what you were expecting to do to spend a little bit of time to sharpen a saw. It feels like you're going out of your way. It feels like you're wasting time, but then overall, like you've actually ended up saving over an hour. That's kind of what I think about that sales and marketing alignment conversation.
I love that. Yes. That's actually one of my favorite quotes. I think it's an Abraham Lincoln quote. As you were talking, I looked it up. It's Abraham Lincoln was often quoted, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe."
Yeah.
It's exactly so spot on, where it's like every month as a sales and marketing org, as a revenue team, you should be carving out time to sharpen your axe. And even last week, a VC partner reached out to me and asked for the latest insights on speed to lead, because even though, one of their portcos has a speed to lead process, an SLA, they wanted to identify if there's been new data to support something different, or they looked at their, top converting deals and, when the reps reached out to those marketing source leads, and they were able to then further optimize that. So love that metaphor or quote of sharpening the sales axe, the sales and marketing axe on a regular basis.
Totally. I need to actually attribute it to Abraham Lincoln rather than...
No, it's your quote now. It's fine.
All right. So those were all really good to be like, okay, this is reaffirming what we already knew. But maybe were there any insights that you got out of this research and report where you were like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that at all?
Yes. I'm so glad you asked. And, I get excited about the things that were reaffirmed, but obviously I'm most excited about what came out that was shocking or new or, at this moment of innovation where we're all learning together how to be effective. The most shocking insight is related to executive thought leadership and how that really moves the needle at the top of the funnel or when you're creating demand within your ICP. I first, though, want to kind of take a step back and mention one reaffirming table stakes thing that is going to build on, that allows us to jump off onto this shocking insight. But what I want to first start by saying is it has become table stakes. Like we know that every single top performing startup that we surveyed and we looked at their performance and their strategy, it is table stakes to deploy a full funnel strategy on LinkedIn. Or I shouldn't say on LinkedIn, in general. And we know that full funnel strategies really accelerate the buyer's journey. We now have data to support that startups active with a full funnel strategy see a 6x increase in conversion rates through the funnel. They actually see a 2x increase in leads or prospects' readiness to talk to sales. So we did some analysis to validate that again, there's much stronger ROI in full funnel. Even though I feel like everyone knows this, and I'm curious your thoughts, AJ, on this, 4 years ago, if my team had recommended to some, most of our startup customers to run top of funnel, many or ungate things, they would have laughed in our faces. And the portion of investment that went to bottom funnel, product focused messaging or request demo pricing, all the things that are more demand capture, we're seeing there's a really big shift and a shift more towards ungated up funnel, kind of top of funnel content and messaging and strategies. And what we found in the data, and this is really the shocking, kind of exciting, innovative insight, is around executive thought leadership and the role that it plays in your demand creation efforts and even in your demand capture effort throughout, the funnel and your entire marketing strategy and demand gen strategy. Looking at everyone's running full funnel, the natural next question is what's working? You can say you're running full funnel, but you're mainly focused on your product or you're doing XYZ, which isn't fully full funnel. But I say that because what matters is, how can I cut through the noise and what's actually working? And what we found is that this cohort of startups, these top performers with the strongest metrics, both business and marketing and sales metrics, they actually cited content featuring company execs or industry thought leaders and third-party reports as the most impactful content type that actually moved their buyers through their journey faster. So actually accelerated them through to close win revenue. So we now have data to support that you are really doing your startup a disservice. You're missing out on revenue if you are not putting your executives front and center in your marketing strategy. And, LinkedIn, and what you'll see in the report, LinkedIn published research that shows now, people trust people trust humans over brands. This came from some research we did in collaboration with Edelman. It makes sense. If you go back to first principles, it just makes sense. People trust people. And so it is now something that, we as marketers, especially startups, when they're sitting on such gold, they have a founder who obviously has a reason they founded their startup. They have a unique perspective. They're innovating in a space that, might be saturated with some of these incumbents. And we need to think about how we can bring those perspectives to the forefront. And that's really what we're seeing move the needle and actually drive higher conversion rates through the funnel.
And I totally agree with that, especially the very first time I got to use a thought leader ad when they came out back in 2023. I ran exactly the same message from the company page as from one of the executives in the company. And the difference was shocking. It was like 0.5% engagement rate from the company, the exact same message from an individual. We had like an 11% engagement rate. And I immediately became a believer, same message, same audience, but they gravitate to people. If you have a face telling you something, you're going to pay more attention than if it's a company, a brand you've never heard of before. So absolutely believer in this, especially after all of our testing we've done with thought leader ads. It's game changer.
Totally. And just, at the macro level, bird's eye view across our thousands of startups, both anecdotally, and we have now legitimate data now that we've had thought leadership ads available for, about a year now. As you mentioned, we're seeing growing adoption of thought leadership ads. But then as you mentioned, it is so far outperforming all of our other traditional brand ad formats. We're seeing higher engagement. It's about a 1.6x increase on average compared to brand ads that don't come from an executive. So just as you mentioned, that's again, the average over a larger sample size. And then most importantly, on, the impact on their bottom line, we did an analysis. So we actually looked at a retargeting audience that was built purely off of thought leadership ads. So every single prospect in that retargeting audience saw thought leadership ads. And then we also had a retargeting audience that only saw other brand ads, not using thought leadership ads. So there was no executives included in any of their ads. And we saw a 45% lift in demo conversion rates from retargeting audiences that saw a thought leadership ad compared to the traditional, brand ads that didn't feature execs.
Wow.
And we also have data that many of our startup customers will ask for where they'll say, hey, can we see the incremental lift between thought leadership ads versus, something else we're doing on the brand side? So we can really prove to our executives that this is something they should be spending their time on and investing in. And I think that leads me to, and I'm curious, AJ, what you've seen, with your clients, but I would say the biggest challenge we see and hear across our startup customers is that it's really hard to get executive buy-in and get them to participate. And I think number one, I want to bust this big myth. It seems like one of the bigger kind of concerns is that so many execs incorrectly think that they need to commit to this robust, big, exec engagement thought leadership strategy that's going to be this huge investment in time. And in reality, it should be very low friction. And there's so many low friction, high impact ways to meaningfully accelerate your startup's growth and, funnel conversion rates by getting, out there and being part of your marketing team's content strategy. Some of the things that we're seeing is the best thought leadership ads are unplanned, unmanicured, very authentic. And it's literally just an executive sharing a hot take or a perspective from maybe a customer advisory board that day, or maybe someone posted something about, a challenge that their ICP is having, and they just took that and reshared it with a couple sentences. So I really want to bust this misperception that you need to have this really robust strategy. And in reality, if you can just produce 1 to 2 low friction, low lift, high impact, perspectives, it goes a really long way in driving results for your marketing team and helping bring in more close to one revenue.
Totally. We've found some situations where a brand would share like a video that they paid 20 grand and they had a studio put all these complex animations together with. And we actually got better engagement, more conversions from a 30-second clip of an executive just talking right into their phone. And it was edited with an AI tool like Descript, that's $12 a month. We got better engagement, better results from that. And what that taught me is like, people want to hear from you, and it doesn't need to be a huge ask or a huge lift from your executive team to just give you a quick snippet, a little bit of thought leadership.
Totally. I love that. That's such a great kind of data point to reinforce how low friction, low lift this is. Something that I know my team and I will be prioritizing heading into this new year. So early, calendar year 2025 is more easy best practices and tips and tricks for executives and founders in the startup space to, align and incorporate, executive thought leadership into their startups marketing strategies, because it has such a strong impact. And there's so many things you can be doing with very little time, very little resources. And there's no one more well-positioned to be effective here than startups, because, they are kind of coming into this space as innovators. They're newer, they're always innovating. They have new perspectives that they should be sharing. So super excited to lean more into helping more and more startups adopt this portion of their strategy, because we now have the data to support that it really does move the needle from an ROI standpoint.
Totally. Love that. All right. Going through the report, there's a lot of gold here. I specifically, from the advertiser perspective, I saw a lot of suggestions that are going to help us with improving the overall performance of our ads, improving conversion rates, improving ROI. I'm curious, what sort of trends and new ways of thinking does the report give us that we as advertisers can go and implement?
Yeah, love this question. And you warned me that you wanted to make sure this conversation went, deeper than what we had in the report and above and beyond, a lot of the insights. And obviously, like, we have the data, and then we have the insights and the takeaways we can pull through. And then we have the hot takes from a lot of the thought leaders that we brought in to give us their perspective and like validate, what we were seeing in our research. And something that came up a lot was this idea of reimagining the funnel. We use the word marketing funnel throughout the report, both in how we share our benchmarks. It's a well-known framework and mental model for marketers. So I do feel a little bit silly saying this because the word funnel is all over this report. But I do think, in reality, we know that that's not how B2B buyers buy. And LinkedIn, our B2BI Institute introduced the 95-5 rule years ago. And it's really become more apparent that the top startups are reimagining the funnel and instead thinking about their prospects through the lens of in-market versus out-of-market. And so I think more and more we'll see kind of the word funnel disappear. And that's something that really became clear in our research. But AJ, I've been following you for a while, and I know you have some thoughts on this. So I'm curious your reaction.
Yeah, I've heard several advertisers come to me. I'm active in a Reddit community on LinkedIn ads and our own private community. And I've had several people say, how do I go in and how do I reach that 5%? Because they're the ones I want to go and drive business from. And I just tell them, like, forget it. Like, don't waste your money trying to hit the 5%, because you're going to waste your money across the whole 95%. Think about your audience in terms of stages of interaction and getting to know you. And this really does feel a lot like the funnel, but we give them opportunities in stage 1. This is what we would consider our initial touch with an audience. We have no idea at that point if they've ever heard of us before, have had any sort of interaction. And then we retarget those interactions at stage 2, where that's a little warmer. And then again at a stage 3. And what we find is, even if you have the same calls to action all the way through all of those 3 stages, what you start to see is in stage 3, conversion rates are 5 times higher than they are in stage 2. And it teaches me that, yes, there are 5% of your audience who are currently in market. Awesome. Do whatever you can to get in front of them for sure, but don't make your entire marketing program be about that. Instead, build an entire, I call it my lead generating machine. build a whole ecosystem around your audience so that you can take those that are cold audiences and eventually warm them, educate them, nurture them until they are ready to respond at a high rate when you finally say, okay, you look ready. Let's have you talk to sales.
Totally. It's so spot on and super helpful to hear specifically how you think about it and the real data points that validate that that's the right approach and the way we should all be thinking about it. My brain goes to the Google Zero Moment of Truth study. And there's also a Forrester report that I recently read. So this is not a groundbreaking stat, everyone knows it, but it's around, I think, 3/4 of B2B buyers choose a vendor that's first to help them with useful content. So we know that it is so important to be there first, before your buyer is in market. Because if you're not, if we know that, 74% of these B2B buyers are actually selecting the vendor that is helping them in the beginning with, before they're in market, before they're ready, helping them, educate them on potentially a problem that they may not be aware of, and being present when it matters most. What really matters, and Casey from Sendoso said this too, like her focus is how they can get on as many of their prospects' day one vendor list as possible. Because again, to your point, if you're also just going to be focused on that 5% of buyers that are in market, they already have top of mind, likely who they want to go with. And so you're already too late and you're reducing that 5% by 75% because 75% of them already know based on who they engage with in the beginning.
Exactly.
Yeah, love that. We saw it in the data. We saw it in our, conversations with all the thought leaders. And it's super helpful to hear like how you advise your customers, because that's totally how we should, or clients, because that's totally how we should be thinking about it.
Oh yeah. If you just show up right there at that last stage, more than likely they're just going to say, we've already done our research. We don't have room for one more applicant to consider. And they just blow right past you.
Maybe they'll take the call with sales because they want to make sure that they've done their due diligence across all the vendors, but you're still wasting, in a way, your sales team's time by not being present in the beginning because, again, they're less likely to go with you. And they likely also took that demo. Maybe there's something there in us doing some sort of calculation of lost time spent or sales time spent on, leads that didn't have that specific vendor on their consideration list, but they're still, taking that call to like check the box and make sure that they feel good about, that day one vendor they decide to go with.
That would be super cool research. I would love to see that.
Okay. I would say there's one other innovative kind of trend or like new way of thinking. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation that you brought up just around measurement sophistication and where we're seeing our startups go. So I kind of noticed, and what became really clear in our research, as well as the conversations we've had with the thought leaders that we featured in our research, is really just around measurement. So both top performing startups' mindset around measurement and then also how they're approaching measurement. So on the mindset piece, it became really clear from our research and our conversations that the top performing startups understand and get their executives and board on the same page that it's not possible to measure everything. And single touch attribution is completely misleading. Yep. Although it's more comfortable to think that we can measure everything, I think getting to a place where, everyone can agree that it's inherently impossible. And it also just doesn't make sense based on the way B2B buyers buy and their buying behavior. Even if you looked at, like, there's so many great insights that came out of Hockey Stack and Factors AI come to mind specifically around someone that converts. Obviously, maybe they're doing some research, or maybe they're not doing research yet. They're obviously like scrolling LinkedIn, looking for information to make them more productive and successful. They might see, some helpful pieces of content that gets them to a place where they're ready to actually do some research. Maybe they go to Google, search for different things. And then you ask them, they eventually convert on a form. You ask them, how did you hear about us? And, your attribution tool is telling you they came from Google, but they're telling you that they heard about you from someone somewhere very different. Casey, also, I'm quoting her a lot because she's amazing. She should come onto this podcast as well.
Yes.
She can be part 2, but she talks about how she was able to get her leadership and board's buy-in on like rethinking measurement as a whole. Because if you actually just looked at, your top performing channel, it would be website traffic. And she's like, that tells me nothing.
Yep.
And so again, it's step one in us all, or I should say like the top performing startups, just like rethinking and understanding and getting comfortable with the uncomfortable in adopting this mindset that it's not possible to measure everything. And we have to move away from just single touch attribution. And then that second piece is moving away from single touch attribution is like what I would call the umbrella of like approach. Okay, now that we know that the B2B buyer journey has gotten longer, it's more complex, we can't track everything, how can we at least up-level the approach to measurement to at least feel really good about where we're seeing different tactics move the needle? Obviously, these different tactics work together. How can we understand incrementality, all the different pieces across, multi-touch, across incrementality, cross-channel influence, measuring over longer time horizons to at least get a sense of, what's moving the needle and driving the strongest pipeline through the funnel and ultimately driving ROI. I was joking with someone the other day. I know everyone's saying it's like the AI gold rush. And I'm like, forget the AI gold rush. It is the measurement gold rush. And I feel like right now is this like key moment where we're watching startups up level and think through how they evolve their approach to measurement. Curious what you're seeing here too. I know that was a lot. So curious what you're seeing here too and your familiarity with kind of these different changes in mindset and approach.
Yeah, I think 5 years ago, clients would come to us and they would go, LinkedIn is not profitable in and of itself. Let's say it's 80% profitable. And they'd say, let's go to a channel that is profitable. And now I look at it and go, wow, if any channel with direct attribution, if you can tell that you're within 20%, and that might even be low, there are synergies with all your other channels that you can't measure. You won't know the impact until someone tells you down the road, like in the middle of closing a deal, someone goes, oh, by the way, I heard you I saw your ad on LinkedIn, and you're like, oh, had no idea you were sourced from LinkedIn. Your UTMs showed us as you coming direct or from Google or something. So I love that. I think we need to realize that our measuring, our tracking, no matter how hard we try, it's always going to be imperfect. And if it's, I always just assume it's probably 20% at least better than what it looks like.
Totally.
Ruby, thank you so much for coming on and sharing the report with us. I hope everyone is opening it up right now and you're going to go scour it. This is fantastic. First of all, I'll just ask you, I know as an employee of LinkedIn, you probably have to tell people like, come follow me, but what would you like us to do? How can we best help you and follow you and all that?
Yes. Well, even if I wasn't an employee of LinkedIn, I actually don't have any other social media. So I'm a big LinkedIn fan across the board, no matter what. It's just given me the most useful insights and information and allowed me to connect, with a lot of our customers and the segment and community in general. So please follow me, connect with me on LinkedIn. We'll definitely be sharing more rich insights as we head into the new year in January, kind of continuing on some of these key takeaways that we saw to share even more best practices. And if you have any thoughts, perspectives, feedback, I would love to hear from you on the report, what we could help you continue to solve or answer. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ruby. We appreciate it. We'd love to have you back for a round 2 on your next awesome report that you'll publish. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me, AJ. You have such great perspective and insights across all of the clients you work with. So it was really valuable to hear your perspective as well on some of the data that we were able to bring to life through this report. So thank you.
Oh, you are most welcome.
Bye.
All right. I hope you loved this conversation as much as I did. Now, if you want to become a LinkedIn Ads top 1%er, you definitely can. And the best tools in your tool belt are going to be found in the LinkedIn Ads Fanatics community. For a low monthly membership, you get access to all of the top minds in LinkedIn Ads, plus all 4 of our courses that take you from LinkedIn Ads 0 to LinkedIn Ads Hero. Plus, there's even an upgrade to get on weekly group calls with me so I can give you direct feedback on your campaigns. If that sounds interesting to you, go check out fanatics.b2linked.com. Now, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. We're so excited to have you here. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more LinkedIn ads related content in your ears every week. Now, if you are a loyal listener of the show, you've been listening for a while, please do me the great honor of going to Apple Podcasts and leave a review right there. and tell anyone else about the show who you know is a LinkedIn ads fanatic. With any questions, suggestions, or corrections for the show, reach out to us at podcast@b2linked.com. With that being said, we'll see you back here next week, and I'm cheering you on in your LinkedIn ads initiatives.